My name is Howard Eber, and I am an alcoholic. I want to welcome everybody to week number 66 in this cycle of the Big Book Comes Alive Step Study Workshop. We are in the Family Afterwards chapter, but before we get into that, I don't remember honestly whether it was this meeting or the Monday deep dive meeting, but somebody asked a question last week about the term pigeon, about the origin of the term pigeon. Where did it come from? And I, over the week, reached out to a number of AA historians who either came to the same conclusion or else didn't really know. And even if they came to the conclusion that it was probably from Dr. Bob, they aren't certain. So I did a little bit of investigation and more further investigation. And one of the things I sent out in the emails today was an article from an archives that was published. There we go. That basically says, I'm not going to read this whole thing, but it basically summarizes it, says that Dr. Bob was a very light sleeper. He loved to read at night, and one of his favorites was H.L. Mencken, who wrote the book The American Language, very sarcastic character. The book was a natural for Dr. Bob's temperament and training. Mencken and Bob were the same age, both witty, had contempt for shallowness and conceit. Mencken was also a heavy drinker, reserved some of his harshest words for those he called the prohibitionists, and he referred to that period as, quote, the 13 years. Make a long story short, he believes that the term pigeon came from Benjamin Franklin, that Benjamin Franklin used to use that word to mean drunk. You could read the rest of this. It did not necessarily refer to people in the fellowship. The word pigeon-eyed is something that was used to talk about people who were under the influence. But you could take that down, Andy. If you didn't get a copy of that, I'll be glad to send you more. But it basically comes down to what I started out knowing, which is if you have the book, Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers, Bert, for your sake, it's on page 146. It says the word pigeon, as applied to an AA newcomer or prospect, was probably coined by Dr. Bob himself. He used that word, said Smitty. Smitty is his son. And one AA recalled that Doc would even announce at the meeting, there's a pigeon in room so and so who needs some attention, or you might refer to the patient as a cookie. So, those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, the term pigeon is a term used to describe newcomers. I don't use it. I don't think I don't think it's very complimentary, but some people use it. Its use is believed to have something to do with carrier pigeons carry a message, right? A carrier pigeon gets a little message put in his foot and he carries it somewhere, so he carries a message. The other belief is that carrier pigeons may carry messages, but they also crap all over you. So that's their a way of looking at newcomers is they carry a message, but they'll crap all over you. I don't like the term. I don't use it, but somebody raised it, did some research. At least we came up with some information. Okay, we are, as I said, in the family afterwards. We're in chapter 9, the family afterwards. Um, and as I mentioned last week, let me just get some information out here. Um, this message, this chapter, I think, and incidentally, there's a lot of folks who uh, say that Bill had asked Annie Smith to write to wives, which we've discussed here, and that's not true. And Lois wanted to write the chapter, but was never asked to write to wives. As Lois remembers, she puts the family afterwards together with two wives, that she wanted to write both of those chapters, wives and family afterwards. Bill decided he was going to write it. He wanted the same tone all the way through. And I think that's his explanation. But the real reason is he took a position with in Two Wives that a wife probably would not have taken. To treat the drunk a certain way, and that all of the problems, if the drunk relapses, are due to the spouse. I don't agree with any of that. So I'm glad that I mean, I wish that Lois would have written it, but be that as it may, in the family afterwards, the message that comes through to me in this chapter is one of hope. Hope that if we use the spiritual principles that we've learned about for the previous 8 chapters, uh, and incorporate that into all aspects of our life, that will make great strides in bringing us closer together with those who are most dear to us, with those who have paid the heaviest price for our alcoholism. And learning from the mistakes of others, we can avoid a lot of the pitfalls that are so common to families in early recovery. And we hope that if we practice these principles, we will stand the greatest chance of having an enduring, happy home life. And that's the message. The bottom line of this chapter is that if we can put those spiritual principles into all aspects of our lives, and when we did our flyover, where we picked out the principles of success, really how to carry out the third part of the 12 step to practice these principles in all of our affairs. There's an abundance of stuff we've taken from the family afterwards. But we started last week on page 122, and I mentioned the family afterwards. What do we mean by afterwards? Well, I think there's a number of things if you want to write some of these down. What does afterward refer to? Well, afterward refers to after working the steps, after adopting those steps into a way of life, after cleaning up the past and present, after rejoining society, after becoming spiritually alive, after the obsession has been removed, after we have successfully readjusted to life. Basically, after we have had a spiritual awakening and are living in the solution. After we've done that, what are we going to run into? What is the family going to run into? How do we deal with those situations? And that's basically what this chapter is all about. The title of it, as I said, is Family Afterwards, but the pseudonym for that could also be, it's also known as the Early Sobriety and Finding Balance chapter. The Early Sobriety and Finding Balance chapter. And balance is I know it's more of an Al Anon word, but a lot of what we're going to be talking about today, especially, and this whole chapter, has to do with finding balance between maintaining the program and keeping the family together. So where we are is, I believe, we're on page 125. Um, we had started the last paragraph. Um, But I'm going to go back to the previous paragraph before it because I do like to review a little bit. And Bill says another principle we observe carefully, may want to underline that is, and let's highlight, we do not relate intimate experiences of another person unless we are sure he would approve. Unless we're sure he would approve. I think I told a story last week about someone I used to go to meetings with all the time, and we'd sit together, we'd talk together, we'd go out to the diner after the meeting, and all of a sudden, he stopped coming with me because he relapsed. And I didn't know what to tell the people in the meeting because they were asking about him. But when I went on visiting day to visit him and I helped get him into treatment, I asked him, "What do you want me to tell these people?" And he said, "Tell them the truth. They need to know the truth that people can relapse and people can get better too. They can come back to recovery." And I told the people that. Point being that his relapse was what I considered an intimate detail of his life. It's not just the romantic parts of our lives, it's the parts of our lives that are somewhat intimate, that we want to be a little bit protective of, that maybe we don't want the whole world to know about. We want to be a little selective with that information. So we don't relate other people's information, intimate details. We find it better, when possible, to stick to our own stories. I've underlined and highlighted stick to our own stories. Basically, he's telling us, tell your own stories. It's I know a lot of people who have picked up things from listening to other speakers and incorporated those stories into their stories because it sounds funny, because it makes them sound like a real hard ass, whatever the reason is. Stick to your own stories. Uh, but I find it interesting that the sentence says, we find it better when possible. When possible. When is it not possible to stick to your own story? You have to explain that one to me. When it's if it's not possible, it's not your story. But be that as it may, a man may criticize or laugh at himself, and it will affect others favorably, but criticism or ridicule coming from another person often produces the contrary effect. Members of a family should watch such matters carefully, for one careless, inconsiderable remark has been known to raise the very devil. And let's highlight the next two sentences. We are very sensitive people. There are so many delicate flowers in AA. We're so easily offended by things. We're sensitive people. Some of you may be aware of the fact that there was a study done in the early days of AA by some noted physicians. He met with a lot of the originals, shall we say, and they did a study. And that study is talked about in the 12 and 12. Bert's on page 123 if you're taking notes. Um, and the study revealed that we alcoholics, were three things. One, childish. Two, emotionally sensitive. In other words, immature. So we're childish, we're immature, and number three, we are grandiose. We are sensitive people. We are emotionally sensitive, which means we're immature. We're childish and we're grandiose. Just an interesting thought, an interesting survey. So, uh, and the paragraph ends with, it takes some of us a long time to outgrow this serious handicap. And I think that's because we may overcome our addiction to alcohol and drugs, but we still hang on to an addiction to approval. I could give a share in front of a room of 100 people, say, and 99 of them form into a line after the meeting to tell me thank you or whatever it is. But the one guy who sits down and he's not saying anything, that's the guy I focus on, not the 99 who said, that was great, thank you. It's the one guy who clearly didn't think much of what I had to say or me. That's what I focus on. It's we have recognition hunger, I think is what it comes down to. Um, we're black and white thinkers. We either did well or we didn't do well. And I didn't do well because that was one guy didn't care for it. All right, next paragraph. Many alcoholics are enthusiasts. Um, I love that word, enthusiasts. The derivation of it means in sync with God, and theos. Theos is the Greek word for God. But here's the thing about enthusiasts. For one, as Chris Schroeder is like very often says, enthusiastic people, they're the ones who succeed. They're the ones who achieve long time sobriety. They're the people who succeed. Enthusiasts do certain things as well. What do they do? Well, they sponsor, for one. If you're enthusiastic about this, you want to give it away to as many people as you possibly can. I know I do. So they sponsor, they take commitments, right? If I'm enthusiastic about this, you want me to do something, I'll do it. I don't care what it is. Make the coffee, be a greeter. They take commitments, and enthusiasts speak when asked to speak at conferences, at meetings. They just do what they're asked to do. And the bottom line, as Chris said, is enthusiasts don't tend to relapse. So I just like the word, everything about it. And he says that most of us are enthusiasts, and I think that's pretty accurate. They run to extremes. And as I said before, we tend to be black and white thinkers, that something is either good or it's bad. It's a tough habit to get past. Um, and I'm going to suggest that you highlight the rest of the paragraph, including the few lines on the next page. At the beginning of recovery, a man will take, as a rule, please circle the word rule. We'll come back to it in a moment. As a rule, one of two directions. One, he may either plunge into a frantic attempt to get on his feet in business, right? Become a workaholic. I got to pay these bills that have backed up. I got to pay these debts that I've accumulated. I'm working and working and working. That's one way that they turn out. Or he may be so enthralled by his new life that he talks or thinks of little else. He's going to get everybody sober. He is, I forget who gave me the expression, but he's spiritually intoxicated. And that means he's of no earthly good down here. We're so filled with the Spirit that we're not much use down here. Bill said it's okay to have your head in the clouds as long as your feet are firmly based on tierra firma. And I think that's what he's talking about. So takes one of two courses, becomes basically a workaholic or spiritually intoxicated. And please, I know I said highlight it, but please over highlight in pink this sentence because it's a promise. In either case, certain family problems will arise. That is a problem. That is a promise. I'm sorry. But I said a moment ago that I wanted to go back to the word rule. At the beginning of the paragraph, third line down, it says, use the word rule. At the beginning of recovery, a man will take as a rule one of four directions. I love, those of you who know me, know I love to connect the dots in this book. And so let's connect the dots for the word rule. It is used four times. Rule is used four times in this book. So let's start with page 7. Let's keep your place on 125. But if we turn to page 74, paragraph 1. And paragraph 1 begins with, if we cannot or would rather not do this. It's right in the middle of the page. But I want to draw your attention to the last two lines of that paragraph, because that's rule number 1. The rule is we must be hard on ourselves, but always considerate of others. Rule number 1 in the big book. Be hard on ourselves. In other words, practice rigorous honesty, but be considerate of others. We don't lighten our load by increasing the burden with somebody else. So that's number 1. Number 2, let's turn to page 101, paragraph 3. And when we get back to page 125, I'll give you all 4 pages so you can write it down there again. So don't worry if you miss them now. The first one was 74.1. The next one is 101, paragraph 3. The paragraph that begins with, so our rule is not to avoid a place where there's drinking if we have a legitimate reason for being there. And if you're familiar with this part of the book, and I assume you are, because we are on page 125 and that's on page 101, so we covered it. That's one of two criterias when Bill says there isn't any place on the face of the earth we can't go as long as we meet two criteria. The first is we are spiritually fit. Here's the second. We have a legitimate reason for being there. I don't go into a crack house to campaign for AA or CA. I don't do that. But if I have to go into a crack house to get someone in particular out of there, I may get another person from recovery and the two of us go in and get that guy out. It's a legitimate reason. I'm not suggesting anyone do that, but I'm just drawing a story of how one is not a legitimate reason and one could be considered. So, number 3, page 118, 2, page 118, paragraph 2, 1, 2, 3, 4 lines up from the bottom of that paragraph. It says, do not, live and let live is the rule. Live and let live is the rule. Be rigorously honest on ourselves and considerate with others. That's 1. Number 2, there's nowhere we can't go if we don't have a legitimate, if we have a legit, that if we, as long as we have a legitimate reason and we're spiritually fit. Number 3 is show, is live and let live. And number 4, we just ran into on page 125, which is that at the beginning of recovery, a man may take as a rule one of two directions: bury himself in work or bury himself in spiritual recovery, one of those two. So once again, if you want me to give you those pages and you want to write it in the outside margin next to that paragraph on page 125, rule C, page 74, 1, 101, 3, 118, 2, and 125, 3. Those are the 4 uses of the word rule in this book. So someone who says there are no musts, we already know there's like 130 some odd musts in the book, but there are only 4 rules, which are musts anyway. You can consider them part of the must, but just as standouts, rules. Okay, back to where we were. In either case, certain family problems will arise. That is a promise. With these, we have had experience galore. We think it dangerous if he rushes headlong at his economic problem. The family will be affected also, pleasantly at first, as they feel their money problems are being solved, right? He's starting to get caught up on the bills. We're not getting all those annoying phone calls from the collection people. The pressure is off. We actually have money to go out and shop. Things are a little bit easier around the house because this guy is sober and he's paying attention to his responsibilities, his financial responsibilities. As they feel the money troubles are about to be solved, then, not so pleasantly, as they find themselves neglected. You may want to underline those last 2 words, themselves neglected. Dad may be, please underline the following words: tired at night, and please underline preoccupied by day. He may take small interest, please underline small interest, in the children and show great irritation, please underline irritation, when reproved for his delinquencies. If not irritable, please underline irritable, he may seem dull and boring, please underline dull and boring, not gay and affectionate as the family would like him to be. Mother may complain of, please underline, inattention. They are all disappointed. Please underline disappointed. And let's highlight this in pink. because it is a promise, and often often let him feel it. Beginning with such complaints, a barrier arises. Got to have balance. Got to have balance. In the movie Dead Poets Society, Robin Williams played a teacher, and he said that he's addressing the graduating students. They said that the careers that you're going after, whether it's to be a doctor, a lawyer, or whatever, are very noble pursuits, and they're necessary to sustain life, right? So pursue that. Be a doctor, be a lawyer, be an accountant. It's necessary to maintain life, to sustain life. But he said, but poetry, romance, beauty, these are the things we stay alive for, right? One thing helps us sustain life. The other thing is why we stay alive for those things. We have to find balance, he said. And we head into this new life. He's talking about their graduating and going into their careers. He's saying, as you head into this new life, God will provide what you need if we stay close to him and do his work well. Now, Robin Williams didn't say that. I added that to it. He's telling the students to have balance. The same thing here. Have balance. But God, and know that God will provide if we stay close to him and do his work well. Balance, balance, balance. So let's get back to, one other thing I wanted to draw your attention to. If you have your 12 and 12 handy, when we were doing the harms inventory, you may recall that I drew your attention to this book, to the 12 and 12, and suggested we look at page 80 and 81. And it talks about subtle harms, which are, as far as I'm concerned, they're behavioral. The way we conduct ourselves around our family. And if you were with us then you will have these following words underlined on the bottom of 80 to 81. Selfish, jealous, miserly, irresponsible, callous, cold, irritable, critical, impatient, humorless, dominating the family, constant outpouring of minute directions for just how their lives should be lived from hour to hour. In other words, subtle harms that affect the family just by our demeanor, by the way we conduct ourselves. So if I then put away the 12 and 12 and get back to the paragraph we just read, we underline certain words. And those words are similar to the words we underline in the 12 and 12. So let's go back over them. Tired, neglected, preoccupied, showing small interest, irritation when reproved for delinquencies, irritable, dull, boring, inattentive, disappointed. Those are all subtle harms that we give off around the family, and they show a lack of balance. And the paragraph ends with him summarizing that. He's saying he's straining every nerve to make up for lost time. And please highlight this. He is striving to recover fortune and reputation and feel he's doing well. He gets reproved. He gets attacked for leaving. He cleans up the whole house. Everything is spotless. He dusted, he vacuumed, he did everything. But he left the dishes dirty in the sink. And that's what everybody goes off on him about. So he thinks that he's done a great job. He cleaned up the whole house. The other members of the house did not. It's just a question of point of view. It's a question of balance as well. So we go from alcoholic self-centered to sober self-centered. And Bill's going to give us some examples of that over the next page or so. We go from being selfish and self-centered alcoholically to being selfish and self-centered in sobriety. Sometimes mother and children don't think so. Having been neglected and misused, let's underline those two words, neglected and misused in the past, they think father owes them more than they're getting. They want him to make a fuss over them. And I'm going to suggest you highlight the rest of this paragraph. It's quite a few lines, but I think it's significant. They expect him to give them the nice times they used to have before he drank so much and show his contrition for what they suffered. Contrition is just remorse, showing remorse for what they suffered. But dad, and let's underline, doesn't give freely of himself. So what happens? What happens when they expect him to do certain things and he thinks he's doing that and then some? I've cleaned the whole damn house and all you're talking about are the dishes. What happens? Resentment grows. And let's underline that. Resentment grows. And let's underline this. He becomes still less communicative. Sometimes he explodes over a trifle, misdirected anger, a spree. A spree doesn't always have to be about drinking or drugging. A spree could be slamming a door. A spree may be punching a hole in the wall. A spree may be gambling. A spree may be anything else. Doesn't have to be drinking or drugging. So he becomes less communicative, explodes over a trifle. The family is mystified. They criticize, pointing out how he's falling down on his spiritual program. On page 61, Bill tells us that he begins to think that life doesn't treat him right. So what does he do? He exerts himself even more and then becomes resentful. So I think what is being told to us here, for what it's worth, is that the real alcoholic still has not learned the fine art, and it really is a fine art, of thinking of others before themselves, thinking of others in place of themselves. The family will feel neglected when he felt neglected when he was drinking. Now they feel neglected when he's sober. They want a living amends, not just an apology, right? Practice these things, not just say these things. We've made amends. We've promised, in a sense, living amends. And I know some people don't like the use of that term, but the book uses it twice, and we can get into that at some other time. I don't want to waste time with it now. But the point is, the family is not looking for that, not looking for the apology. They're looking for that, the living amends. Do the things that you said you were going to do. Bottom of page 126, first sentence is highlighted in pink. It is a promise. This sort of thing can be avoided. Both father and family are mistaken, though each side may have some justification. And please underline this, it is of little use to argue and only makes the impasse worse. Yeah, I was thinking about this section that some of us, and I know I'm guilty of this as well as anyone else, I think that I don't always listen to hear, that we listen so we can respond We're listening for what's being said so we can respond. And it usually starts with our saying, yeah, but, or that's true, but. Those two things are perfect responses for anything. So when we listen, we have to develop that art, that fine art of listening when people are speaking and not hearing so we can plan what we're going to respond with when it's our turn to talk. It's caring about other people. Exactly what I said before. It's that fine art of giving a damn about somebody else above ourselves. Okay, so sorry for that tangent. It's a little used to argue and makes the impasse worse. The family must realize, please, must is in green. For those who think there are no musts in this book, there are quite a few of them. Some of them appear as other ways, not just must. They may appear as maybe the word essential, so on. But the family, and please underline the words the family, incidentally. The family must realize that dad, though marvelously improved, is still convalescing. The family. He's suggesting that the family maintain a certain degree of gratitude for the fact that he's not drinking. And that's, I emphasize, to the family, because Bill already told us previously that when the alcoholic thinks that sobriety is enough, he's unthinking. But when the family doesn't see that, sometimes they have to be reminded, at least things are better because he's not drinking, that he's embarked on a path that will lead to a better life all around. But it's a pathway. They should be thankful. Please underline be thankful. And again, it's to the family that he's sober and is able to be of this world once more. Remember, this is addressed to the family, not the alcoholic. As long as we're talking about it, let's hold your place here. Let's turn to page 82, in case anybody's not familiar with what I was referring to before. On page 82, Bill tells us in paragraph 2, what did I say? 82 paragraph 3. I'm sorry, 82 paragraph 3. We feel a man is unthinking when he says sobriety is enough. We think a man is unthinking when he says sobriety is enough. And that is the answer to a question posed on the previous paragraph. The previous paragraph, about the third line down, says the only thing he needs to do is to keep sober. That the alcoholic who says the only thing he needs to do is to keep sober. And Bill's response to that is we feel him in as unthinking when he says sobriety is enough. So that's what I was talking about before. And it may seem a contradiction to what we're reading here, but it's not. One is directed to us, the other is directed to the family. So the family must realize, and I'm not just making that up. He does say the family must realize. So we're talking to the family. Back to page 127. They should be thankfully sober and able to be of this world once more. Let them praise his progress. You may want to underline that. And above it, I've written, be constructive, right? Rather than criticizing his spiritual program, like they mentioned in the previous page, how about trying to be constructive? Let them remember that his drinking wrought all kinds of damage that may take long to repair. If they sense these things, they will not take so seriously. And let's highlight the rest of this paragraph. In fact, let's start with the sentence, if they sense these things, in pink, incidentally, because I believe this is a promise. If they sense these things, they will not take so seriously his periods of crankiness. Let's underline that word, crankiness. Depression. Let's underline that. Apathy. Let's underline that. Which will disappear when, and let's underline, there is tolerance, love, and spiritual understanding. And in the inside margin, which is the right side of that paragraph, I've just written, time takes time. I hated that expression. I hated it every time somebody said that to me. I wanted to strangle somebody. The next guy who said it was going to get strangled. Time takes time. I want to know when, so I could write it on a calendar, and there's the day that that'll happen. So, and what he's describing here, why I had us underline crankiness, depression, apathy, is because those are examples of those subtle harms we were talking about a moment ago. He gave us a few of them on the previous page. Small interest, irritation, irritable, preoccupied, inattentive, disappointed, etc. He gave us even more words in the 12 and 12. He's giving us a few more here. That if they sense these things, they will disappear when he continues his recovery, tolerant, patient, loving, with concern for others. These are the things that will come in time if he maintains his spiritual journey. So continue. The head of the head of the house ought to remember that he is mainly to blame. Now, let's do this. In the previous paragraph, in the margin, left-hand margin, the outside margin, right, to the family. Just so we're clear, that paragraph at the top of the page is directed to the family. In the same margin to the left of this paragraph we're about to read, let's write to the alcoholic. Because Bill is bouncing back and forth here, and it can be confusing. So in the first paragraph, we're talking to the family. In this paragraph, we're addressing the alcoholic. The head of the house ought to remember, that's how I know he's talking to us, because he's directing us, that, and let's underline, he is mainly to blame for what befell his home. He can scarcely square the account in his lifetime, but he must is highlighted in green, see the danger of over-concentration on financial success. Although financial recovery is on the way for many of us, we find we could not place money first. And the next sentence is highlighted in pink. You may already have it highlighted from when we did the principles of success. But this is a promise for us. Spiritual well-being always, please circle that word, always followed spiritual progress. It never preceded. Material well-being always follows spiritual progress. It never preceded. So we as alcoholics, we are filled with guilt and we're filled with remorse over what we've done in the past. And now we're sober, and now we're filled with anxiety about the future because of what was done in the past. So we overcompensate, we overwork, we dive too deeply into business to set straight financially the household, and don't take care of the emotional needs of the family. Since the home has suffered more than anything else, it is well that a man exert himself there. Please highlight this next sentence. It's a warning. He's not likely to get far in any direction if he fails to show show unselfishness, under his own roof. He's not going to get far if he doesn't show unselfishness and show love under his own roof. What we're talking about is, I guess it's easy when we're sitting in a meeting for an hour or an hour and a half every day. I love you, you love me. We try our best not to help one another. But what about in the home? What about when we leave that meeting room and we hit the air outside and we get in our car and someone cuts us off? And we get in line at the grocery store and the people in front of us in the express lane have 100 items and you're only supposed to have 12. What about that? What about when you come in and the house is in a state of uproar? The kids are yelling, the dog's barking, the wife is telling you, take care of those children. What about then? We have to do this 24 hours a day. So show unselfishness and love under your own roof. We know there are difficult wives and families, but the man who's getting over alcoholism must, please circle that in green, must remember he did much to make them so. Remember again, time takes time. AA is not going to give you a backhoe to fill a hole you dug with a soup spoon. AA is not going to give you a backhoe to fill a hole that you yourself dug with a teaspoon. It's going to take time. You dug that hole. It's going to take time to fill that hole. As each member of a resentful family, let's underline resentful family, begins to, let's number a few of these things. Number one, see his shortcomings. And two, admits them to the others. He lays a basis for helpful discussion. These family talks will be constructive. Please underline be constructive. If they can be carried on, and highlight please and underline the rest of this, without heated argument, self-pity, self-justification, or resentful criticism. If we turn to page 117, keep your place on 127, but if you turn for a moment to 117, see what it says on the last line of that page? We just read on 127 that without heated argument, we got to be constructive, without heated argument, without self-pity, without justification, without resentful criticism. On page 17 at the bottom, he tells us how to disagree. He says, careful not to disagree in a resentful or critical spirit. We don't drag up the past. That's not part of the problem now. What is the problem now that we have to discuss? Let's stick to that. We don't argue in a resentful, critical manner. And he's saying the same thing here. And for what it's worth, you may want to jump also to page 98. On page 98, again, the last two lines of the page. Argument and fault finding are to be avoided like the plague. So he's not telling us that we're not going to have disagreements. He's telling us how to disagree. Argument and fault finding are to be avoided. Dragging up the past is to be avoided. Saying things in terms of black and white is to be avoided. Okay, continuing back on page 127, two lines up from the bottom. Little by little, mother and children will see they ask too much, and father will see he gives too little. Let's highlight this last sentence in pink. It's a promise. Giving rather than getting will become the guiding principle. That comes from practicing the spiritual principles 24 hours a day. It doesn't become part of our everyday life by going to 90 meetings in 90 days. And I think what he's saying is this. Let me read it again. Giving rather than getting will become the guiding principle. And I think what he's saying, you may want to write this on the top of the page, the top margin, is thinking about me is a big part of the problem. Thinking about me, about myself, is a big part of the problem. Thinking about you is a big part of the solution. Thinking about me is a big part of the problem, but thinking about you is a big part of the solution. So once again, giving rather than getting becomes the guiding principles. Continuing. Assume, on the other hand, that Father has, at the outset, a stirring spiritual experience. In other words, he's had that sudden white light experience like Bill has had, like Fitz Mayo had. Suppose the alcoholic has had that kind of experience. Overnight, as it were, he's a different man. He becomes a religious enthusiast. Please underline religious enthusiast. He is unable to focus on anything else. Let's underline he's unable to focus on anything else. And incidentally, we could change that word. It says religious enthusiast. He could become a job enthusiast. He could become an AA enthusiast. He could become a relationship enthusiast. Now, all of a sudden, he's an expert on relationships. He could become a counseling enthusiast. He's going to solve everybody's problems. He's going to be a therapist enthusiast. So we could get overboard in any of these areas, is what he's saying, I believe. So he's unable to focus on anything else. And I'm going to highlight the rest of the paragraph. I know it's a big chunk, but I'm going to highlight the rest of it nonetheless, because I think it's important. As soon as his sobriety begins to be taken as a matter of course, the family may look at their strange new dad with apprehension, then with irritation. Apprehension means uncertainty. So they're going to look at him a little cross-eyed, and then they're going to be irritated. There's talk about spiritual matters morning, noon, and night. And again, you could change that word from spiritual to job, to AA, to relationships, to whatever the problem is that he's trying to solve. He may demand that the family find God, and please underline, in a hurry. Spiritual intoxication. We mentioned it a few pages back. We can't be so spiritual that we're of absolutely no use down here on earth. So he can't demand that the family find God in a moment, in a hurry, or exhibit amazing indifference to them and say he's above worldly considerations. He may tell mother, who's been religious all her life, that she doesn't know what it's all about, and that she'd better get his brand of spirituality while there is yet time. We're victims. I forget who said it. One of the speakers that's all around all the time says, we're victims of the good dope syndrome, right? I've got better dope than you do. I think it was Bob Darrell who said that. I've got real AA and you don't have that. That I've got real religion and real spirituality and you don't have that. We get on a high horse about whatever it is that we're preaching about. So, um, when father takes this tack in recovery, the family may react unfavorably. Yeah. They may be jealous of a God who has stolen dad's affections. While grateful that he drinks no more, they may not like the idea that God has accomplished the miracle where they failed. Please highlight the next two sentences. They often forget Father was, and let's underline beyond, human aid. They may not see why their love and devotion did not straighten him out. Dad is not so spiritual after all, they say. If he means to right his past wrongs, please underline why all this concern for everyone in the world but his family. What about his talk that God will take care of them? They suspect Father is a bit balmy. And as I understand it, in 1939, balmy just meant a little soft in the head, a little going too easy on things. Um, I'm just trying to find a note here about that, but it'll go on. I'll come back to it. Okay. Um, he is not so unbalanced as they may think. Many of us have experienced dad's elation. We have indulged in, here it is, let's underline, spiritual intoxication. Part of the problem that we're not necessarily talking about here, that of spiritual intoxication, it could sometimes lead one to take credit for their own success, for their success. Spiritual intoxication can lead to the alcoholic taking credit for his successes. If he knows better than everybody else, there's a certain degree of ego and self there. So, um, he's not so unbalanced as they may think. Most of us have experienced dad's elation. We have indulged in spiritual intoxication. And please highlight the rest of this paragraph all the way through to the next page. I love this section. Like a gaunt prospector, belt drawn in over the last ounce of food, our pick struck gold. We have reached that last house on the last block. As Bill says, in the final analysis, we have found God. And he's referring to the same thing here, that we have gone as far as we could. That gaunt prospector can't tighten his belt anymore. He finally strikes gold. Joy at our release from a lifetime of frustration knows no bounds. Father feels he has struck something better than gold. For a time, he may try to hug the new treasure to himself. And I know I said to highlight this, but I'm going to ask you to over highlight in pink the rest of the paragraph, because this is a promise. He may not see at once that he has barely scratched a limitless load. Let's underline limitless load, which will pay dividends only, and you may want to underline this, if he minds it for the rest of his life and insists on giving away the entire product. In other words, you can only keep what you have by giving it away. That's probably where it comes from. I went to a workshop once, and when the facilitator got to this part, um, after he read it, he said that he's asked his family to put on his tombstone when he passes away a certain epitaph. And the epitaph was to read, "He went to the mines every day." We went to the mines every day. We go to the mine every day. We pick up this book and we work through it with somebody. We go to a meeting and we help somebody. That's our going to the mines, right? Like the gaunt prospector who's gone as far as he can, he finally strikes gold. He doesn't give up. He's continuing to try. That's what we do. That's exactly what we do. So he wanted on his gravestone the words, he went to the mine every day. I like that. I like that. Um, Basically, I think he's saying, God, keep me hungry, right? So I can go find that next newcomer, that busted up unit that catches fire and recovers, and watch that busted up unit now take somebody else and take them through the book and get the same result. There's nothing better than that. Nothing better than that. And that's what we're talking about, going to the mine every day, opening up that book with somebody and getting to work. Continuing, where are we? We got a few minutes. If the family cooperates, how much left we have in this? Yeah, we got a few pages to go. Okay, if the family cooperates, dad will soon see that he's suffering from, and let's underline, a distortion of values. He will perceive, underline that word. Perceive just means how and what he's thinking, the way he's thinking, what he's thinking. He will perceive that his spiritual growth is lopsided, that for an average man like himself, please highlight, a spiritual life does not include his family obligations, may not be so perfect at all. Let me repeat that. Let me go through the whole sentence, actually. He will perceive that his spiritual growth is lopsided, that for an average man like himself, a spiritual life which doesn't include family obligations may not be so perfect after all. Like God takes something bad and makes something good out of it. We alcoholics can take something good and make something bad out of it. I don't know if that makes any sense, but the alcoholic who perceives that his spiritual growth does not include those obligations may not be so perfect after all. If the family will appreciate that dad's current behavior, which is self-serving, I believe this is a self-serving presumption, incidentally. If the family will appreciate that dad's current behavior is but a phase of his development, all will be well. In the midst of an understanding and sympathetic family, these vagaries of dad's spiritual infancy, please underline spiritual infancy, will quickly disappear. We move from the infancy of abstinence. As a result of doing this work, we grow, we move from the infancy of abstinence to the maturity of recovery. From the infancy of abstinence to the maturity of recovery. Keep working at it, and things will get balanced out. We've got about 5 or 6 minutes. I'm going to stop there. If there's any thoughts, concerns, let me turn the recording off.